Okay, let's take a look at Colonial. I'm trying to remember this as stratagem, but I'm trying to remember how I got this. It's recent. I believe it came through the GMT sale, which is a little weird because usually they're other companies' products. Don't end up, my battery charger is not working right. Don't end up, great, eligible for the sale, but I believe this did. If I understand correctly, things are a little confused right here. There are a lot of changes. One of them is I'm back to an Vario. I got a couple of old ones there. I don't know how the fuck to fix them. Basically, the thing that's prevented me from using either of those is that the little screen connector is a little damaged and it doesn't, fuck. My charger's not working right. Screw it. It doesn't show a good visible line on it. But this looks like it's pretty much the same as the other camera. I'm not sure. The color looks a little different to me. So maybe it's not quite as cool as those were. Maybe it'll be a little more yellow, but I'm more familiar with the interfaces. I fucking hated that Samsung. Has a higher resolution, but it just does so many things wrong that I've never been able to get used to it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this game. So this was attractive to me because obviously I'm kind of into games that represent colonial expansion, etc. You know, EU, whatever, but also things like Struggle of Empires excited me, even if it didn't get the history right enough. This is a more abstract game in some ways, but it's got some interesting things, including, so the base game handles up to 6 players, and you're just sort of unnamed colonial powers coming out of Europe and trying to gain control of the rest of the world. This game, though, has an expansion, or an optional rule, where you actually have nations associated, and they each have their own little special rules. Changes things a little bit, tries to impart a little bit more flavor, and honestly, from what I see of it, it looks like it imparts more realistic flavor than Struggle of Empires did. So I'm kind of looking forward to that, even though it doesn't cover the European side of things at all. It's just focused on the colonization side. What do you have for pieces? Well, you have these generic discs, which are used for a lot of things here. They combine for treasury, merchant fleets, and naval forces. I think they're also used on these tracks and on the diplomacy chart. I'm not absolutely positive. I think these are used to indicate ownership of a colony. Unfortunately, they don't have the nation's flag on it. They're just generic. However, for the discs, there is an option. You know, you have the capability to put stickers on them. I don't feel like that's terribly necessary, although if I was playing with the 6th player who's black, I have a hard time telling black from blue. It's not that I'm particularly colorblind, it has more to do with the lighting. Speaking of which, one of the other changes, I threw another lamp in here because those overheads are just sucking completely. I got to figure out something that I can put in them that'll work better. And yeah, there's a bare bulb. I couldn't figure out how to get it together correctly. That little thing didn't fit. It's over in the corner there. You have these, which represent 5 of these discs, and you can flip them over for 10s, just to, in case there's a lot of something somewhere. That's primarily if you end up taking out loans, which we assume you're going to do. You have player aid card, which holds a place to hold the fleets and treasuries, and it also has a place to hold your victory conditions, which is getting 10 prestige. At that point, the game is over, and whoever gets the most wins, and there's probably some tiebreakers and stuff. You have a few other counters. These are your prestige markers. There's one of them in each colonial area in the game. It's kind of hard to find the colonial areas. Basically, they're places that have this number in them, or they're one of these 3. But Yeah, yeah. This is part of this. It's just they're not easy to distinguish from each other on the map, and I may have missed some. I may not have. I'm not sure. I don't know what these white flags are for. I assume colonies that go independent or something. You got missionaries, and I think these are revolts. And then these are booming cities. There's allowed to be one booming city on the board, and it'll generate some additional effects, income, etc., for whoever controls it. You have this chart, which is going to be used to track monopolies in various things like rags. No, this is like Orient goods from EU has that, I think, and then these others that are more specific. A bunch of special dice, and each nation has its own nation-specific card, which gives the special rules for that nation. And then they have a set of these characters who are going to be the things you play. You have a limited number. You basically have 6 cards, I think, with 2 characters on each. And in the base game, you have a choice to use one of those 2 characters off that card, and then the card's discarded. In the option that I'm playing with, most of the players have an additional card from the 6th player set. We have the actual colonies themselves, which have a couple of things on them. This is the difficulty, I believe, to explore the area. This is the number of natives there, which is something you have to overcome. Goods that you can trade, and once you go to certain areas, they're rich in goods. Most of them only have one, some have none. And that's about it. Each of these has a prestige marker on it. When you are the first person to explore the area, you get that prestige. Australia has 2, and the discovery of America has 2. One of them isn't really, one of them you get when you discover America, the other one goes over to the circumnavigation, and you have to do that as well. You have a number of tracks which affect different things. Economy, I don't remember what that does. Logistics, Navy, which is going to affect your combat with other boats. Seafaring is going to affect your exploration rolls. The other 2 I'm not sure about yet. I have read the rules twice now. My life has been kind of chaotic at this point, and during the Great Cold, where we had no electricity and I had enough firewood for one day and we were out for 5, did not it turned out I couldn't play this. I was planning on fiddling around with it and playing it without filming. Okay, let's start taking a look at the rules, and let's hope I can do better with this camera than I did with the new one. Unfortunately, this is a really big map for a Euro-ish game, and I'm gonna, knock things around a little bit. Apparently there were earlier editions of the game. They've got a note of where the rules have changed. Let's see. There's also the market, presumably where you can buy and sell stuff. Adjacency. 2 territories are adjacent. It's pretty obvious most of the time. In some cases, there's an arrow on the map to show an adjacency. So, for example, the Caribbean is adjacent to a couple of things here, even though it's over water. Unexplored territories are the ones that have the prestige markers on them. They're these which are explored but can be exploited. There's a first player token. I've thrown it over there. Why? I don't know. It's kind of random. We went through the setup. It does not talk about these tracks right in the intro. So each turn, there's going to be 5 segment or phases within a turn, and one of them, the Endeavor phase itself, includes 5 rounds in which players play the cards. So a lot of cards get played. You have a hand of 6 cards, but probably 7 in this variant. So in the Endeavor phase, you get to choose which of your cards you're going to play. You secretly set it up, and then when everybody's selected, you reveal them. And then the first player has the option of which of the 2 characters on his face-up card he uses. And then he activates the effect of that card. And we'll get into that as we get to the rules. Merchant fleets. During that phase of the game here, you can move a treasury to merchant fleets for each monopoly you have. You have monopolies here. The Dutch have a special rule. I don't know all the special rules yet. We'll look at them as we go, but the Dutch have a special rule that gives them 2 extra monopolies so they can ship more merchant fleets into play. Strangely, the Spaniards start off with 4 merchant fleets. I'm wondering if this represents sort of a pre-Dutch revolt type of situation where the Dutch are still controlling some of their fleets, but the Spaniards are sort of controlling some of them, because otherwise all those merchant fleets don't really make a lot of sense for the Spaniards, but we'll see. And the lack of Dutch shipping doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, on the first turn, the first player is chosen at random. After that, it's going to rotate around. But if any player has more monopolies than any other, he takes the token instead, which I think means that the Dutch actually should be first player at the beginning of the game, but I don't know. We'll see if there's a special rule on that. Each turn, players can move treasury to their naval forces box, and this is equal to their space on the naval track that has a 1 on it. These tracks have different numbers on them, like that goes 2, 4, 6, 10, 0, 1, 2, 3, to indicate, you know, different effects that they have. They have a numeric effect on something. In this case, the naval forces is the number of navies you can build each turn. Loan interest. If you have any loan pools, they get 1 more disc added to them, meaning that they're going to be harder and harder to pay off. If you have no loans, you won't be paying loan interest. And that is the 5th phase of the turn. So that is the entirety of the turn. Let's go into the different pieces. Controlling resources. Okay, on the map itself, counters have to be placed on the resource spaces. There's no limit to how big that stack can be, but the counter that's lowest on the pile actually controls the resource. Any others are put on top based on the order that they came into that pile. A monopoly means you're the only person who controls that resource color. And the colors are kind of hard to see. They're the band around it, I think. Maybe in conjunction, because like some of these, it's kind of hard to tell. It really is. Like, I mean, I wouldn't call these different colors, but they're different shades. And that's going to be kind of a tricky thing, I think, to keep track of the monopolies, but probably not too hard, because when a resource changes hands or whatever, it's a big deal. If you break another person's monopoly, taking a resource that the player had a monopoly of, you have to move your marker 1 space to the left, which is bad on the diplomacy chart. There is a diplomatic cost to breaking a monopoly. This has only occurred when you take a vacant resource space. If you take the monopoly, say, from another player directly, then you don't have to pay. Each gold resource is a monopoly all by itself. And that's why there's 3 separate monopoly spaces, just because gold is so valuable. At any point in the game, if you have more counters than any other player on the resource space, you get control. Your counters drop down to the bottom, and your diplomatic marker moves 1 space to the left. Again, like the other rule, this does still hurt you diplomatically. It just that rule says, oh no, this rule doesn't take effect. Well, it does there, but there may be other ways you can, that can't happen. You can't move back 2 spaces on the diplomatic track when taking a single resource space. So taking a resource at the same time as breaking a monopoly implies moving back only 1 space. So yeah, taking control doesn't necessarily take a monopoly, but whenever you take control, it's going to cost you diplomatic. When a counter at the bottom of the pile is lost for any reason, the next counter, if there is one, takes its place and controls the resource. However, if somebody else has more counters of theirs in the stack, then all their counters drop down to the bottom instead. If several players tie, the person with the lowest actual counter wins. Okay. The different progress tracks. This is the technology of the game, essentially. Seafarer. This is going to reduce your difficulty for explorations. And it ranges from 0 to 3. Everybody starts with a 0 for that, unless I got something wrong. Navy. This is going to be how many squadrons you can buy during the naval phase. Everybody starts at 1. It can go up to 4. Logistics. This is going to be the maximum number of treasuries you're allowed to move to an explored territory when playing the Viceroy action. And that's up there. Right. No, that's over here. And France and the Dutch have an advantage there. I may start adding stickers to this if I kind of want to. I'm kind of torn on it. It's like, why go through all that effort? The colors are easy. And the only reason I really want them is to differentiate blue from black in a 6-player game where blue is not France anymore. The economy space. When you sell goods with the trader or create a booming city using the governor, and when borrowing treasury using the financier, the economy is going to have some effects. It also has some restrictions on it, which we'll go over. Tea and opium. You cannot place on these resources until you've reached an economy of 6 or higher. So you cannot colonize India or China. Once any player reaches economic 10, which is the abolition of slavery, any shipment of slaves will drop them back a space on the diplomatic chart. Generally, slavery just becomes so unacceptable. And of course, the English continued their slave trade for a while when everyone else had pretty much gotten rid of it. Prestige. When you explore a territory, you get a prestige. You also get it for using the conqueror and governor. And those just come from the pool. And if you use a war, the defeated player loses a prestige to the winner. And this goes directly from the defeated player's track and added to the victorious players. If you go above 10 prestige, but you can't win, you just keep adding excess prestige to the table. Why can't you win? You cannot win the game if you have any loans in play. The flags are for the colonies. It's marked with a colored flag token. This means no other player can place counters on a colony, although if there were other players there before, they stay. And when using a trader, you add to your economy for each native power symbol. When using the trader, you add 1 to your economy for each native power symbol in all of your colonies. That sounds like a huge number, because these are the native power symbols, and they can grow quite large. So a Chinese colony is a great selling point. A colony is lost if you no longer have a counter on it. You lose the colony and all unrest markers, and the former owner loses a prestige. And then you get a white independent state there. Independent states will double their native power at all times and for all purposes as long as they remain independent. This is the only change resulting when a new colony is founded on an independent state. Remove the independent state marker and stop doubling the native power. Unrest markers, or the flames, or whatever. There's different images, but they both mean the same thing. If it has an unrest marker but no mission, it might revolt if somebody plays the rebel character. The diplomacy track, over here. This works a little differently from the progress tracks. The spaces don't cost you anything to make. Did we see this? You begin with a counter on the first spec. During the game, the scientist allows you to advance on these tracks, and the number of printed on the track space indicates both the cost to be paid to reach it and the bonus gained. So yeah, okay, so it costs you that number of money, and that goes out of your treasury into your stock. Okay, but on the diplomacy, you make progress along this track normally with the ambassador character. Your starting space is fourth from the left. You ordinarily cannot go further left and right than the printed limits. The diplomacy track prevents a player less advanced than another from waging war on him. A less advanced player is a player further to the left on the track. And when you're on the leftmost space, you can perform normal actions that won't cost you a diplomatic penalty without any penalty. However, you can't go to war with anyone because everyone hates you and they'll all jump on you and you'd lose the European war, so you can't take risks of that nature. Okay. The explorer character is going to tell you the normal exploration procedures, but let's go for some special rules because they decided to do this first. I already kind of talked about these. The Discovery of America has 2 tokens in it. When you're discovering, before America's been discovered, the printed exploration value of the first space you hit until it's been discovered is going to be increased by 2, so it's going to be harder to find it. Once you find a territory in the Americas, then the penalty goes away and that person gets an extra prestige. So they'll be getting 1 for the territory they find and 1 for discovery of America. The second discovery space goes down into the circumnavigation, saying that's now available. Okay, when you use an explorer in a round or turn after America has been discovered, you can choose to attempt to circumnavigate the world. This is an extra action. You'll have to discard a treasury, and it's taken after your normal exploration. You make a difficulty 6 exploration roll, reduced by your seafaring bonus, and add 1 for every continent in which you have a counter. There are 4 possible continents for this purpose: Africa, the Americas, Asia, and Oceania, which includes the Indies and Australia. Levant, Barbary, and Egypt are excluded from this rule. So, you know, if you have something in the Barbary coast, you can't count it as Africa because it's not like it's Mediterranean connected. If you're successful, you get the prestige from the circumnavigation box, and then circumnavigation no longer exists. But if you fail, someone else can try it. No bonus to being Captain Cook here. That's actually one thing I like in EU, is that like there's a reason to do the second circumnavigation. Australia has 2 prestige. When you explore Australia, you get 1 prestige, and then you can make another roll. If you fail the second one, your action's over without step 2. And the second prestige is available to someone who wants to explore Australia. The key is, unless you get double exploration of Australia, you can't actually build any, you can't start colonizing it. It's not fully explored. Players can exchange treasury at any time during the game. It's the only thing they can exchange. I am assuming they can exchange promises and actions as well, but in terms of like, I won't do this, or I'm not doing this, give me a buck. Character cards actions: when you use a card, you choose which of the 2 characters you use. You can't use both. And you could also choose to just forfeit your round and not take an action. Now remember, you're going to pick one of these, everybody reveals, and then when you actually get around to doing it, maybe you don't want to do it anymore. The ambassador, he can move your marker 1 to the right on the diplomacy track. He could also remove additionally, he can remove an unrest marker anywhere on the map. It's kind of a nice combination. The conqueror, he can found a colony. You do so in a territory where you have at least as many counters as the native power, and where you control all the resources. If these conditions are met, you put a colony of your color on the territory and you gain a prestige. That prestige will come from the pool. Other players' counters above yours in the stack, if any, are unaffected. There can only be 1 colony per territory. A colony cannot be established if a territory has no native power. Really? Yeah, like the Amazonia. It's not like there's no natives there. It's just, it's only there for exploration. You can't exploit it. And then see more rules on colonies. When founding a colony, you can either opt for a single exploitation colony, no further changes, or choose one of the following options to gain additional advantages. If you choose several options, you must perform them in numerical order. First is company. You can transfer one of your counters from the territory to your merchant fleets box, i.e., if this doesn't leave your colony without any counters whatsoever. You can pillage. You can gain treasury equal to the territory's native power, but you get an unrest marker there. If the territory has a gold resource, you gain twice as much treasury as the native power, but you still get the unrest. You can repress. Discard 1 or 2 unrest markers from the territories and move your marker the same number of spaces backwards, your marker, on the diplomacy track. Plantation and triangular trade. This can only affect territories with a beige end resource. I am guessing that's this, but I'm not sure. The definition of beige is not... is that the right things? Tobacco, sugar cane, cotton. Sounds like it, but you would think other things might be involved. Steal 1 merchant fleet belonging to another neighbor for every black-edged resource you control. So that's slaves. As the only thing with black edge, unless precious metals is, I don't know. Take a merchant fleet from another player and add it to your merchant fleet. You wish they'd just say slaves, but maybe, I don't know. Okay. The Explorer. To explore, you choose an unexplored territory and roll 10 special dice. In order to succeed, you must get successes equal to the difficulty of the territory. The difficulty is dropped by 1 for your seafaring, for each level of seafaring bonus. It's dropped by 1 if you have a counter in an adjacent territory, but only 1. If successful, you take the prestige from the territory and add it to your prestige track and go to stage 2. Special rules for Australia, Americas, and circumnavigation here. When successfully exploring India or China, your diplomacy moves 1 space to the right. You can then end your action or choose one of the following. Place one of your merchant fleets on a resource space in the territory. This is what your merchants are for, giving you a trading post. Or Conquistador Adventures. Move, I don't know what this is supposed to mean. Move 1 treasury into a resource space in the territory and place an unrest marker in the territory as well. So yeah, I think the choices are you can either expend a merchant fleet to go into the resource, or you can spend a treasury in order to place and you'll place a piece. You'll place it on the stack, and you'll get an unrest marker there as well. So obviously it's better, to do the merchant fleet, but that may be more expensive because you have to take an action to build merchant fleets. Financier. Take twice as many counters from your pool as your value on the economy track and form a pile on the loan display on the board. Add the same number of counters from your pool to your treasury. There's no limit to the number of loans you can have during the play. However, you can't win while there's any. At any time during one of your rounds in the Endeavor phase, you can interrupt play to pay back loans, partially or completely. For each treasury discarded, you can discard 1 counter from one of your loans. As long as you have a counter on the loan, you cannot win the game. You don't win a lot of loans because each one gains 1 counter per turn. However big your loan is, the interest is always the same. Governor. The governor can place the booming city on any explored territory where he has at least 1 counter, as long as the chosen territory does not already contain it. To do so, the player must discard at least more treasuries than the value of the booming city currently on the map. If there's no booming city on the map, he must pay 1, or at least 1. He cannot pay more than the level of his economy, no matter what. If the conditions are met, the booming city is put at the marker value of the territory. And these have different values on them. Going, I think, all the way up to 10, which is as high as your economy can be, so that's fair. When the new booming city is successfully established, the former booming city is removed if it exists. There can only be one on the map at the time. If the territory is a colony, the owner of the colony gains a prestige when the booming city is established. If a colony is founded on a territory containing the booming city, the founder of the colony gains one extra prestige. Remember, something might go independent and then you could take it back over. A booming city that is located in a colony that is lost remains in play. The owner loses 2 prestige, one for loss of the colony and one for the newly independent booming city. The other effects will be under the merchant, which is our next character. Remember, these are the things off the cards. The merchant can ship goods equal in number to the number of merchant fleets a player has in this merchant fleets box. You know what I'm really glad of? That this isn't using the fucking Puerto Rico rules where everybody else gets to do the same action you chose. I don't know. It's great in Puerto Rico. I hated it in Twilight Imperium, and I would probably despise it here too. It's a mechanism, and that's all it is. It doesn't really represent anything. Well, it does in Puerto Rico. Hey, look, there's a ship coming in, or whatever, maybe. I don't know. Some of them don't make much sense. For every goods shipped, okay, let's take a look. So the number of merchant fleets you have allow you to ship a good. Any counter on the map controlling a resource produces 1 good. For every goods shipped by a merchant fleet from one of your controlled resources or from another player's, you get a counter added from your pool over to the market. For each goods that you take from a resource another player controls, this player adds 1 counter from his pool to his treasury. You still add a counter from your pool to the market. Both players earn something. Any player is free to refuse to sell his goods to you. Okay, well, what's up with the counters in the market? I don't feel like I'm actually gaining anything from them, do I? If there's a booming city in play, all merchants must first ship the booming city's territory's goods, irrespective of which player controls them. This is mandatory. The controller of the new resource cannot refuse the transaction. At the beginning of the merchant play, there's a booming city shipment sequence. If goods have to be bought from others, these players earn their treasuries. If the booming city's territory has unrest on it, a pirate check takes place. To resolve, roll 1 die per unrest marker. If there's at least 1 success result, the shipper loses a merchant fleet and cannot ship from this territory. I'm assuming they may continue other shipping outside the booming city. If 2 successes or more are obtained, additional to the above, the booming city has been pillaged by pirates. Replace it with a booming city of 1 less in value, which you would not do if it's at 1. It would stay a booming city. Then you proceed to another resource with the merchant action if possible. If the booming city is in multiple resource territory, you must ship all of its goods if possible, in the order of your choice. But pirate attack only happens once per merchant action. If the booming city ends up in an independent state, you cannot ship from it. Okay. So far, I'm not understanding what the advantage of stuff in the market is. Missionary. The missionary allows you to flip an unrest marker to the mission side, or you can just place a mission on an explored territory if there's no unrest marker in it. Missions are going to stop rebellions. The rebel card, you can spark a rebellion in a territory containing at least 1 unrest marker and no mission, or place an unrest marker in an explored territory, or you can discard a mission marker from the map. You roll 1 special die for each, when there is a rebellion, you roll 1 special die for each native power symbol multiplied by the number of unrest markers in the territory. That could be a lot. Each success causes the loss of 1 or more of the counters on that treasury. The player who placed the rebel chooses the casualties. It doesn't matter whether or not this was a colony. Casualties resulting from a rebellion must be satisfied, if at all possible, including as a last result by the player who sparked the rebellion. Well, I don't know if it says last result. He could choose to lose his own, I think. I don't know why he would. Maybe if he's paid. The scientist can advance you 1 space on a progress card if you discard as many treasuries as the number on that space. The sovereign. You can declare war and attack another player who is not more advanced, i.e. further to the right, from you on the diplomacy track. You lose the space of diplomacy after declaring war. A year of war is resolved in 2 theaters of conflict, on land and at sea. The mechanics are the same for each theater. Each warring player simultaneously rolls a number of special dice equal to the number of counters or squadrons they have, to a maximum of 5 dice. Counters? I don't know. We may have to look at the... Looks like counters in the squadron space, looking at this. Oh no, it's per area. Wait, what? Okay, let's see some more here. Counters or squadrons, depending on the situation, to a maximum of 5 dice. Then casualties are removed and you follow to the next step. Okay, fight the war on land. Every territory where both sides have counters. Each shared territory is a separate battleground. Casualties are enemy counters in that territory. Maximum of 5 dice per territory per player. Casualties are removed by the player inflicting them. After removing all casualties, check for changes in resource control, but do not incur diplomatic penalties for changes of control. Naval forces, squadrons, attack, maximum 5 dice. Casualties are enemy naval forces first, but then their merchant fleets. Surrender. The defender has to decide first, followed by the attacker. Players at war must resolve at least 1 year of war before being able to surrender. The war ends when one player decides to surrender. The player who surrenders gives 1 prestige to the victor, if he has it. Defeat. When one side is unable to fight, to roll any dice, neither on land nor at sea, whereas the other still can, then he loses the war and gives a prestige to the victor. Generally, I think what this is going to mean is if one person, well, no, if one person has boats and the other doesn't, I guess. I don't know. On land, if players do not share counters in any territory, even if this had previously been the case, they're both unable to fight on land. At sea, when a player still controls at least 1 squadron while the other does not, the one who still has a squadron is considered able to fight. So I don't know if there's ever a case where one side is unable to fight on land and the other is able to. If both sides are unable to fight, however, the war will end with no further action. If the war doesn't end, you keep doing this process until it does. You go through the entire sequence. Okay, more action. The viceroy. Okay. The trader. The trader can move goods from the market to your treasury. You can move as many goods as your economy level, plus the combined native power of all your colonies, the market that you're able to exploit. When you move goods of your color, you add them to your treasury. When you move goods belonging to another player, he takes them back, adding them to his treasury, and you take a counter for each one from your pool and add it to your treasury. Any player is free to prevent you from moving their goods. People are also free to prevent you from shipping their goods. So once things are in the market, you have to take another action to suck them out, and you can suck other people's stuff out and sell that, and you both make a profit off of it. Cost twice as much to the whoever you're selling it to, but they're just abstract. Okay, the viceroy. The viceroy can place treasury counters on the resources of any one single explored territory. The maximum number of treasury counters that can be placed is equal to the level on the logistics track. They can be freely placed in any and all of the resources in the chosen territory. And remember, rules of resource control, this could cause diplomatic consequences. Let's go to the Varian. At the start of the first turn, the last player, the one on the first player's right, chooses one of the 5. Yeah, okay. You will only gain, let's take a look at Spain's. Theirs is kind of complicated. So they have a list of special abilities here. So like they start with 4 merchant fleets and 10 treasuries, which I have exploited there. That's not to say Spain was the most wealthy country. They were the one most willing to commit early on to exploration, although honestly Portugal was pretty heavily committed too. Okay, they get an extra missionary. That's this. It's a card from the other set. It can only be used for missionary. They get extra Madura. Okay. There's a set of special rules here that we have to cover. Spain has a lot of them. Spain can only found colonies where it has a mission marker. They have flamboyance, again a special rule. Tordesillas, they can only explore and place counters in their historical goals. And on reaching a 6 prestige, all the double star rules disappear. Which means basically they no longer have anything special. They even lose their missionary. Then they have a set of historical goals. Now those historical goals, when you found a colony, that's the only time you get a prestige from founding a colony. You can still found colonies anywhere else, but you don't get any prestige for it. You're just like building up the market. They also are cities parenthesized here, like Buenos Aires in La Plata. That means the only time you get points for booming cities, for creating a booming city, well, there's a few rules here. If you create a historical booming city, you get a booming city that's worth 1 more than what you paid for, even if that exceeds your economy. Maximum still 10. Furthermore, booming cities give you a prestige only if they're in your historical booming city. But that's when you establish it. I think conquering them, you can still get one. Treaty of Tordesillas, Spain and Portugal cannot place territories outside their goal areas. As soon as Spain and Portugal reach 6 prestige for the first time, their special rules do not apply anymore. I think that's per country, even though really kind of the Treaty of Tordesillas kind of fell into decay altogether. But Extremadura. Spain's conqueror can found colonies in the Americas in the normal way, or they can use the Extremadura rule. A mission marker must be present in the territory, and the resource must be controlled by Spain already, but there's no minimum requirement regarding counters. If a colony is followed using this, an unrest marker is placed in the territory before any colony options are chosen. So they can build colonies a little more quickly. However, they have flamboyance. They're going to have to spend as many treasuries as their prestige at the end of every turn, or else discard one of their prestige. Logistics. Somebody has, I think it's the Dutch, a logistics maximum of 1, which means they can't grow their logistics. Now, what was logistics? It's the viceroy action. So that's kind of increasing the economic value of colonial territories much more quickly, exploiting the resources more quickly. The Dutch are actually unable to do that. I think they're the only ones who have that role. +2 basic monopoly. The Dutch Republic gets 2 free bonus monopolies at all time. Now that gave them some advantages. I don't remember entirely what they were. I think in terms of building merchant fleets, but I can't recall. Great Britain's reroll. Each year of the war, in each year of war, their war at sea phase, they can reroll all their dice. They have to keep the result. They can only do it once in each year. Well, they can only do it during their naval war. So really, you either do it or you don't, because you only get 1 naval roll. France can play 2 sovereigns in the same turn to fight 2 separate wars. They have 2 sovereign cards on their thing. They can also use sovereigns to move 1 space to the right on the diplomacy track instead of waging war. So they have kind of like a semi-extra ambassador. 2 to 3 player game. They suggest using the nation's rules. And if you don't have historical goals, those territories don't exist. And if neither Portugal or Spain is in the game, circumnavigation and discovery of America are ignored. It will be already discovered. First turn guide for beginners, I don't know. I'm not going to worry about that. Anyway, let me read it, and then I'll tell you what I learned from it. I'm kind of excited about this. You know, it's got a Euro-y attitude and feel and everything to it, but it does feel like, unlike Struggle of Nations, it is actually trying. Is that what it's fucking called? Struggle of Empires? I don't know. It's Struggle of this, that, and the other, and there. Struggle of Empires may be the more ancient one. I don't know. I've lost some of my taste for Wallace games, as you can see. I mean, Brass was fucking awesome, and there was Liberté was kind of exciting. Maybe a couple others that his Choo Choo game was kind of cool, but I just feel like he's kind of lost me because of his unwillingness to pay attention to historical stuff. Still kind of want to get God's Playground, but yeah, good luck. Good luck finding that cheap. And Magnates looks like such a watered down version. I mean, God's Playground, I got to play it, and it was way too Euro-y for what I want anyway. But it's kind of interesting. Anyway, this looks like it's going to do a better job of representing that colonial type situation. It may, you know, and games like Endeavor are just too abstract. This feels like it's really trying to capture something to do with the trade aspect and everything. It's not just an abstract game with a theme. This looks like it actually is trying to treat the subject matter with some seriousness, which Wallace seems like he's doing, but then, you know, you start looking at it and you're like, well, this is just bullshit. You know, he's fucking making shit up or unwilling to commit just a little bit more complexity to the rules. With this game, they made the good choice. You know, hey, if you care about that, here you go. If you don't care about that, you're all equal, which is kind of cool. And I could probably do that with whatever the fuck that is, Struggle of Empires, whatever. It's got to be over here somewhere, but I don't know. I'm hoping this will be kind of right in my alley, to tell you the truth, in a lot of ways. I like games that... It's not like I don't like big complex games, but I like games that kind of play a little easier some of the times, and I'm certainly in the mood to do that right now. All right, let's send this one up. See how this camera works, whether it does stupid things with the videos like the Samsung does.